Good morning, everyone. We need to pick up with our lesson from yesterday. I think today's will be pretty short. We're looking at chapter 23, the second part of the first section. We looked yesterday, or post-World War II, and we looked yesterday at the Soviet expansion policy, how the Soviet Union, which is today's modern Russia, was trying desperately to expand communism to encompass the whole world. So here's where we're going to pick up with Americans are trying to contain that policy. They don't want communism to take over the world. And the Americans have a distinct advantage at this point, just after World War II, because Americans have an acceptance, a prestige and goodwill in the world that we have not had previously. And we have this because we've come to the aid of the world twice now to help them win wars and defeat the big bad guys, okay? So the United States is going to use that prestige and goodwill to help prevent the spread of communism around the world. Our policy has been in previous wars, as they ended, to return to isolationism. You guys do your thing, we're going to do ours, and we're not going to look at whatever's going on elsewhere. But we can't do that this time. We're going to, this time, adopt a policy of containment. That's this word here. Oh, I do not have an arrow today. Oh. Okay. I was hoping for an arrow. It sometimes shows up and sometimes doesn't. But the Truman Doctrine is the policy that Harry Truman, our president in America, is going to put forward, saying that we need to contain communism. Put a lid on it. Don't let it spread. Okay? Contain it like you would in a container. Okay, so he made this the major objective of American policy, foreign policy, during the Cold War. And how did he do that? Well, one of the major ways we did that was, first of all, we sent aid to Greece and Turkey. And we talked about that yesterday, how Greece was on the verge of collapse, and we sent them money to help them rebuild their economy, rebuild their infrastructure, and once again be able to take care of the people in Greece and in Turkey. Well, so the next stage is America is going to put forth the Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan was designed by George Marshall, who was the United States Secretary of State. And his idea was that we come to the aid economically, we give money to the countries of Europe to help them rebuild. We offered it to all the countries, whether they had fallen to communism or not. All of the countries were free to accept that aid. It was given in the form of just outright grants. It was given in loans, various methods. But most countries of Europe, in fact, 16 different countries of Europe, eagerly accepted this money and used it to help them rebuild. But the Soviet Union and the governments that they had installed across Eastern Europe did not accept it. They were afraid that there would be strings attached. Not that we had said that there were going to be, but they just felt that there were going to be, so they would not take the money. Here's some examples of what happened in the Marshall Plan. Okay, so we've seen both sides, how the Soviets are trying to expand. The United States is trying to contain communism. But what about these two coming each at one at the other? I want you to look at this map very carefully. What happened to Germany after World War II is Germany is divided into 4 regions. Notice the flags. The red area is controlled by the Soviets, the yellow by the United States, the blue by France, and the green by Great Britain. Each zone is controlled immediately after the war by these countries. As we get into reestablishing Germany as a country of its own, the United States, France, and Britain unite their portions and form one government called, I believe it's the Democratic Republic of Germany, something like that. I think that's right. So Berlin had been divided into 4 zones. The 3 are reunited and form West Germany. They have a capital at Bonn, and we're going to establish a republic form of government. Unfortunately, when they came up with this plan before the war ended, they also decided to divide up the city of Berlin. So the city of Berlin, as you see contained completely there within the red Soviet section, is also subdivided into 4 parts, one for each of the Allied powers. So then when we, as working with Britain and France, reunited West Germany, we also reunited West Berlin into one section, not 3 separate, but one section. But the problem is that they're deep within the Soviet territory, and we're trying to supply them and help them reestablish, their government and their stability. But West Berlin is completely cut off from West Germany by the Soviet territory. And the Soviets decide to not play nice. They decide that they're not going to let supplies into West Berlin. So the Americans and the British got together and planned an airlift. You see in the bottom picture the planes taking off and landing. We literally landed and took off planes every 90 minutes at the height of the Berlin airlift. Every 90 seconds, trying to make sure that the people of West Berlin had the supplies they needed to reestablish and rebuild their city, as well as just food supplies, paper, fuel, things like that. Eventually, after I think it was about 18 months, the Soviets finally figure out that we're not giving up and we're not going to let them take all of Berlin. So they finally give up and they allow us to get our supplies in without having to take it by plane. We can take it then by driving on the roads. They had cut off all the roads. Okay, the next thing we need to talk about is NATO. NATO is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This at first started as United States, Canada, Great Britain, a couple other countries, maybe France and Italy, all agreeing to come together and help each other. A sort of a military alliance saying, if any of us gets attacked by the Soviets, we will come to each other's aid. It started there. But then the Soviets responded by forming their own Warsaw Pact, where they formed an alliance with their Eastern Europe countries and and formed that type of a military alliance with them as well. This was in 1949. Okay, but then again in 1949, another big thing happens. The Soviets test an atomic bomb. Okay, so you have this, we are standing up to the big bully of communism, supposedly, and the Soviets feel like they're standing up to the big bully of capitalism, and the two are going at each other. Well, this is the start of what we call the arms race, because each side wants a competitive edge over the other side. They want to have the bigger and better weapon so that it keeps the other side from attacking us. If we have a bigger bomb than they do, then they know better than to attack us, right? Okay, so Truman at this point figures, okay, so if the Soviets have the atomic bomb, which by the way, they took the technology from the Germans when they invaded Germany, and then they got the rest of it by buying the terms they need, the information they needed from American spies. But that's an episode of American history, not world history. So they have their atomic bomb. It worked. They exploded it. So at that point, Truman says, you know what? We need to develop something else. So he orders the production of the hydrogen bomb. Because, as I said, both sides wanted a military edge. The hydrogen bomb was tested on November 1st of 1952. 164,000-pound device was exploded on Elujalub Island. I don't even know how to say that name. The blast column was 30 miles in diameter and 135,000 feet high. The mushroom cloud that came out of it spread to 1,000 miles wide. The light intensity was 10 million times greater than a supernova. The island no longer exists. It has been wiped off the map. Where it once was is an underwater crater more than a mile wide and 164 feet deep. U.S. President Dwight Eisenhower said of the bomb's power that in comparison, the atomic bombs loosed on Hiroshima and Nagasaki seem like mere firecrackers. So that's how much bigger the H-bomb is. The Soviets will end up testing their first H-bomb. We tested ours in 1952. They will test theirs in 1955. And the nuclear arms race will continue. And that is all I have for today. I hope you are taking notes and using those notes on your quiz to make sure that you are doing your best job. Your interesting fact for the day: butterflies taste with their feet. Okay? Butterflies taste with their feet.